I welcome everybody to the Sales Development Summit. Man, I'm excited. I've actually got a great interview today. This one's a little bit of a different session than normal, but I've got a friend and truthfully a colleague of mine, Jake Reni, who happens to be the director of the Sales Academy over at Adobe. Jake, how the heck are you, man?
I'm great, Dave. How you doing, man? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. Jake and I go way back. I don't know, Jake. What was I don't know if I can think of the time where we actually met, but we've been working on the AAISP as co-presidents here in Utah.
Yeah.
We've been talking social ABM. I mean, we've talked about just about everything. Has it been 4 years? When was it? It seems like me and you just kind of slowly met. Is that right?
It's probably been, yeah, it's probably been about 4 or 5 years now. It seems like ever since, I got into SaaS, I think we started connecting, and now we just anytime there's a hot topic, you and I just kind of suss out the BS on it and
That's right.
decide where we stand. So it's just kind of fun. Like we're always just tackling the topics we think are BS.
Well, the best thing is, man, I always know if I've like done something stupid because Jake will call me out. I'll post something on LinkedIn. He's like, "Hey, dumb, hey, you idiot! Like, what the heck are you posting that for?" No, that's not true, but he keeps
I
me on.
gotta keep it. I gotta keep you straight, man.
He
I
keeps
gotta
me
keep you
on.
straight.
I probably didn't do justice with the introduction, Jake. I know you've kind of taken on a new role, which sounds really cool. I think it's worth maybe taking just a minute and going one step deeper into that. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing over there at Adobe?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm head over the Adobe Sales Academy, and the exciting thing about our academy is it's the part of our inside sales org where all of our new talent enters into Adobe. It's where they go through a rigorous 6-week onboarding experience. Then they're part of our inbound team. And then from there, they actually get an assignment after they've spent some time learning and certifying. They get an assignment to be a part of one of our teams, whether it's one of our segments, verticals, digital media, digital marketing. And then from there, I also, because of the influence of the org with that role, I also manage our strategy, methodology around our account-based um, efforts, and then all of our tech stack that goes along with that. So it's kind of a crazy role, and I couldn't have just defined anything that I would have loved to do better.
Yeah, I think that's going to make for a good conversation today. So first and foremost, congrats on the new role. I'm sure it'll be exciting. Um, so our time is short, so I want to dive in, and I think this conversation is going to be interesting, mostly because the depth and breadth that you've had, not just I think at Adobe, but your previous roles in some of your other sales positions. I want to start. You just mentioned, at Adobe, you have kind of your hand on the dial there around structure. And man, when it comes to sales development and it comes to structure, there's these different elements that seem to be at play. I've got certainly the account-based motion kind of versus this high velocity motion and trying to navigate how that may work.
Yeah.
And I've got outbound, reps who play into that. And I got inbound reps. Sometimes they're blended reps. I got obviously different locations, maybe sometimes international. And it makes for a pretty complicated structure. And just focusing on sales development, if you were sitting down with a new leader or you were thinking about kind of designing that, even at Adobe, what are some of the thoughts you go through to try to nail down, like, what does that go to market even look like?
Yeah, no, it's a great question because that's been a big part of what I've been working on this year, is helping with some of the structuring of our segmentation and the methodology and each bit of that segmentation and like really blueprinting what it is that we're doing with each team and is there even different methodologies that go into each one of these segments. So man, let's like we gotta
Where do you
deconstruct that question for a second.
Yeah.
Let's yeah let's start with segmentation, right? I think it's one thing I'm noticing a lot right now especially on LinkedIn and from different thought leaders or consultants or coaches or different workshops I'm even attending or webinars, I'm seeing a trend that I think there's a lot of prescription of one type of an approach to all segments. And that to me, like, couldn't be any more dangerous, because I see that a lot of people are prescribing to just blanket statements out to the industry of, hey, you should be approaching your sales cycles like this, or you should be segmenting or structuring your teams like this. You should be having only inbound or only outbound. And the reality of it is like, look, let's think about your business first. Are you an enterprise business? Are you selling to enterprise buyers? Are you a medium business? Are you SMB? Are you very small business, right? You have high velocity? What's the average sales cycle? Yeah. Because all of those things play into how you should be structuring your org, right? Because if you have a large enterprise business, you need to start thinking about segmentation all the way from named accounts to, that strategic business to more of an enterprise corporate business. And then maybe dipping into that bottom tier, which for an enterprise organization probably caps it or bottoms out at like 50 million. But then all of a sudden you've got other companies who are saying 50 million, like we would die to be doing business with companies that have 50 million in revenue. And our average deal size though is like, what, 5K a pop?
Yeah.
So the first thing is like comes to mind when you talk about that is like, well, we got to be careful about what we're subscribing to right now, because there's not a one size fits all solution, and we can't be talking about blanket statements when it comes to how we're segmenting our market.
Well, and that may be one thing to kind of just make sure we double click on, because I do think there's a debate. So you are of the opinion that you can run different models in a business. And at the moment, I'm just focusing on, let's say, like an account base versus high velocity. It isn't a one. It sounds like that's maybe a myth you've seemed to find, is that, if I'm going to be an account base or I'm going to be strategic, I got to be strategic everywhere. But what I'm hearing you say is that that's not the case. That doesn't have to be the case.
No, let me post some questions, right? Like it's absurd to think that way.
Yeah.
The beauty of account-based, right? The beauty of an account-based program, a true account-based program, is that it's completely unscalable. Okay. So how are you going to run an unscalable program? Like the cost of sale alone makes it like unviable, right? So the things you got to be thinking about in a real account-based model is, one, you have to be in an organization that truly is aligned with the marketing team. So you got to ask yourself, is marketing bought in? And when I say marketing, is demand gen bought in? Is field marketing bought in? Is product marketing bought in? Right? And then is your inside sales leadership bought in? And is your field leadership bought in? If you're not aligned with every single one of those points, you're not doing true account-based selling.
Yeah.
You're just doing like personalized selling at different levels of scale, right? Because now we got to make sure, is our spend targeted, right? Are we actually spending money on accounts that we want to be seeing engagement with? Are we actually influencing the engagement of the accounts that we care about, right? Are we influencing the people that we want to be seeing in those accounts? Do we even have a right fit with those accounts, right? And then marketing and sales need to be constantly communicating, because sales needs to be going to marketing and saying, hey, I gave you a list of target accounts and I'm not seeing engagement happening. What's not happening? What are you guys not doing, right? And marketing needs to come and say, hey, you gave me this list of accounts, of highly targeted accounts that we're working on, and we're spending and we're seeing high engagement, but the activity on your end is low. What's the deal, right? What gives? If that's not the kind of conversations you're having, you're not doing account-based.
Do you feel, this is probably worth to just go one more step down this account-based concept, because I get the idea that, to the previous question, this is something that's just not, you can't do that to every segment of your business if you're going to be that kind of, that kind of discipline, that kind of structure, that kind of focus. But I want to ask you one more question on the account basis. You kind of opened it up. If you mentioned the alignment piece, is there any other tip or advice you'd say to people? hey, look, if you're running a good account-based model, you've got alignment, you've got X, and you got Y. I mean, you've got to have those to be successful. I mean, you probably could
Yes.
talk about it for 3 hours, but what's those kind of three things you
Yeah.
leave behind to a leader?
Yeah. You first got to know you got the right fit, right? So you gotta be understanding what your organization's fit score is for your accounts that you're going after. When I say fit, I mean, one, do they match like just the firmographic, technographic, and look like models in your current account base, right? That's one thing. Two, the other thing is fit is what I think a lot of people are replacing the old kind of um like anim with, like where we're not necessarily only talking about authority, need, and like urgency and money, but we're also talking about like, is this something that actually is a major pain in the organization? Is it a focus is it a focus project, right? So fit is multiple elements, and we can measure now way more than we've been able to measure before. And inside of fit also comes intent, right? Are you actually measuring your intent scores from your buyers, right? Are they on the web actually searching for these things? So first is intent. Second is engagement, right? So if you're not measuring engagement, then, it's like this count might be all the fit in the world, and they might be exactly who we need to get after, but your buyer's on maternity leave. So you're not getting any engagement from this account. And you would know that if you're measuring engagement. Or they just implemented a huge marketing automation platform, and they're just not ready to do a CRM switch, right? Like, you got to be thinking about like what's the engagement going on in the account, and are you actually going to get the currency of time from them right now?
Yeah.
So you can measure fit with many different tools. You can tell, are they hitting your website? Are they consuming your content? How often are they doing? Who's doing? And then how often is that person doing it? So there's a lot of different layers of engagement. And then on top, so fit, engagement, and then I think the third piece is are you actually are you actually driving the right content, right? Like, is your organization aligned to now drive the kind of content that's a value add to those organizations at the different stages in their journey? Because nobody knows your buyer's journey better than you. So are you delivering the right kind of content to your buyers at the right kinds of stages, at the level of engagement that they're showing you? So like those three things are, I think, critical to a true enterprise level approach to account based.
I love it, man. I love it. And I mean, I just feel like I don't think people are there. I mean, the content is an interesting one, but when you think of fit and you think of engagement, I mean, I'm on the road a lot. I just don't think people are there. I mean, I think that's pretty forward thinking.
No.
And I'm even scratching my head thinking, man, we could certainly even do better at my own organization, but that's a conversation for a later time. Let's pop out of that for just a minute and kind of finish this piece on structure.
Yeah.
So a little bit of account based versus high velocity. Um, you and I were debating just the other day kind of this idea of like inbound leads, and should you respond fast or not? It's one of those things, again, it's our weekly bash kind of session between Jake and I. But taking a step back, outbound teams versus inbound teams, I mean, do you still split them? Do you keep them blended? Should you respond fast to leads? Or how do you think about this outbound, inbound kind of situation?
Look, like, again, I think it all comes down to segment.
Yeah.
So the blanket statement, like, you should respond to every inbound lead within 5 minutes in a highly strategic model. Well, like, I would caution in certain scenarios, because you might be dealing with someone who's actually just been tasked to do some due diligence or research, or collect some data for different stages in the process, or procurement. Here's an experience I once had. I was dealing with one of the top 3 SaaS companies. It was a deal that I had been working on for 9 months, and I had an inbound lead come from this account. And I'm thinking, wait, like, are we growing this deal? I was getting pretty excited, wondering, like, I'd never heard of this person before. I'll reach out, find out it's someone in the procurement department, and it made them really bugged that the vendor was talking to them and reaching out. And I get a call from my buyer telling me, Jake, you can't talk to this person. You can't bug our procurement team. They actually they have policy in which they can't communicate with you. Now, on the exact same account, I was out of town. My SDR, who was supporting me, had an inbound lead come in and reached out, and it was the legal team from the exact same account. And again, he reached out within a few minutes, and we got our hands slapped again, saying, "Hey, you can't be communicating with our legal team." Like, whoa, that, like, we got to be thoughtful there. So if we would have done our homework and due diligence, and communicate with our buyer, we would have gotten some feedback of, no, like, you don't need to talk to them right away. However, now let's talk about our smaller segments, our high velocity deals. Inbound leads, they're like no brainer. If you're not communicating with them right away, like, you're missing out, because the data is extremely strong that comes from you and Harvard Business Review. But also, we need to be thinking about that buyer in a different way. Their cycle is very different. By the time they're reaching out, they're much further along. And you got to be thinking, if you're not communicating with them instantly, your competitors are the one educating them.
Yeah.
So like, to me, it's like, you gotta segment them and understand, where does it make sense to communicate right away, and where does it make sense to maybe pump the brakes for a second and understand more context.
Yeah, I mean, I think that statement of, you should respond to every single lead immediately is probably wrong, and you shouldn't respond to anything immediately is probably wrong. There's probably, it depends a little bit on the segment. One question before we move on from that: do you feel like in an account-based model, you and I've talked about this a little bit, but the quick kind of top of mind response, I mean, are we sending inbound leads directly to I'm talking about it maybe in more of an enterprise segment, a strategic motion? It should be account based. Do we send those inbound leads to the sales rep, or do we still try to funnel them to a supporting, maybe sales development team that, again, maybe they don't, to your point, let's not go into lead response time at the moment. Maybe there's a little more of a strategic process.
Yeah, let's talk about
which way do we go?
Talk about the structure, right? So I'm a fan of inbound teams. I think inbound is still very important. However, just go back to segmentation.
It depends.
Having an inbound team in an enterprise, like highly enterprise strategic named business, to me makes very little sense, and I'll tell you why. You have think about the profile of SDR that you have working those accounts. They're more seasoned, right? They've been perhaps working on some of these accounts for a lot longer. They have been nurturing leads in those accounts sometimes for over a year. And the moment one of those contacts responds, there's no one in that organization that you want talking to them no one else other than that SDR who's nurtured, who's built the relationships, because you can't tie that single lead to any exact attribution, whether it was marketing that drove that communication, or an event, or like an article, or an SDR. It's all these things that you have done collectively as a group to slowly drive that behavior to your website. And you've got to get that SDR who's the most seasoned, the most prepared to have that conversation. Now, again, let's talk about smaller segment. Let's talk about mid-market or an S&P segment. It makes all the sense in the world, because think about all the junk leads you get. You get a lot of just unqualified stuff that doesn't, even like your scoring systems they can't filter them all the time. You're going to get random students or people who are not qualified, or consultants that are going to end up in your queue. And you don't want to be wasting the time of seasoned SDRs with that information. So, get an inbound team to filter through those deals, incentivize them on at-bats or, appointments passed, not necessarily opportunities approved, and just have them churn, right? And have them put a lot of attention on those inbound leads, and get them in the hands of the SDR once you know it's qualified.
I love it, man. Interesting. All right, next topic. We got to keep moving. Time goes fast. Want to switch from structure over to systems for a minute. I mean, this has been your bread and butter, I think, for years. I think you're always ahead of the game. You know the market. You know the vendors. You're in with a lot of these people. Obviously, in your new role, it sounds like you're going to be really kind of diving headfirst into this. Go big picture for a minute. I mean, how do people start thinking about a tech stack? What should it be like? What are some of the elements you need to be thinking about?
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I actually just I just did a webinar with Nancy Nardin on this. And I mean, if anyone has done some homework on it, it's her, right? She recently came out with the first the first sales technology landscape, similar to the marketing landscape slides that everyone sees. She's done a lot of work on putting that together, and then she also had something she calls her maturity model of where you are probably as an organization in your tech stack maturity, and what things you should be incorporating in your tech stack. And there's obvious things, right? So like your CRM, we live in an age where even though CRM is not driving deal velocity, it's your system of record. You have to have it, right?
Dang it.
What? Yeah, agree or no? Disagree?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I mean, that's fun. I mean, I think that's a conversation
Yeah.
in of itself. It's like, CRM. I love that system of record kind of connotation. We've got to, I think, come to terms with it being almost a necessary evil, that a lot of people do it, but it isn't probably the thing that's going to give you the competitive advantage that you're looking for. It's not going to give you that acceleration, but it is something that it's there. And so let's move on to the next point in the conversation.
Yeah, another one that's kind of interesting that I bring this up not to just plug Adobe, but to make a point. She did a study on technologies that were most valuable in the stack for sellers, and for organizations that used digital signatures or digital contracts, the digital signature systems were the #1 ranked solution that organizations said that they needed. But it's funny because for organizations that did not use digital signatures, it was like it was ranked #7 on their list of priorities. So the other thing that kind of came to the surface in that study was for organizations that have recognized the importance in which digital signatures or e-signatures create in their buying cycle, recognize the value, like speed to deal, velocity, creating ease of use for your buyer. All those things are actually no-brainers and should just be a part of everyone's stack. Like if you're in B2B sales and today and you've got some sort of a digital buying experience and you're asking your buyer for a wet signature, I think you're crazy. So you gotta be definitely thinking about that. Now the next thing, this is where it gets exciting. I'll have to go quickly through it, but now you gotta start thinking about what do we do for prep, right? So how are we doing research on our accounts? So then there's awesome tools like Dun & Bradstreet. Hoover's just did an overhaul of their technology. You got Discover.org. You've got Zoom Info. These are all great solutions that we use at Adobe. And then next, you got to be thinking about your calls, right? So before, we used to always just think about what are we using to make calls, the dialers and stuff like that. I'm not talking about dialers. I'm thinking about how are we actually analyzing our calls. So tools like Chorus, right? Chorus are going to record your calls, all right? And then they're going to give you insights. They're going to transcribe your calls, and they're going to give you talking points and coaching points with your sellers on areas of the calls that were misses. And to me, this couldn't be a technology I'm more excited about in our organization. So then you got to think about orchestration, email orchestration, sequencing your touch points. So tools like Chorus, not Chorus, but Outreach or SalesLoft, to me in the modern sales stack, it's one of those things you can't live without. You just need to have a solution that empowers your sellers, that almost becomes the new hub for sellers. CRM is not the hub anymore. It's just a system of record. Tools like Sales Loft and Outreach are your hub. That's where your sellers are going to be spending all their time.
And I
then from there, you got to be thinking. Go ahead.
And inside sales, man. I mean, you got to throw inside sales in there, right? I mean, we got to tool, right?
Well, I was waiting for you. I wasn't going to give it to you for free, bro.
I saw you doing it, dude. I saw you doing it. I almost didn't pull it. I usually don't plug it, but watch out, I'm here. No, I'm just kidding. But you
waited too long. So you got, and then the next one I wanted to say is like social, okay? And then the last one I want to point out that's really important is that not a lot of us are thinking about, but a new medium in which we should be prospecting is video. So tools like Vidyard, BombBomb, Videolicious, killer tools. Nobody's doing it, but like the contact rate, like the response rate is insanely high.
Yeah. Do you feel, I mean, and when you say video, I mean, specifically, like those are more video embedded in email. That's kind of the secret that we're seeing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the medium that's predominant.
Yep, video and email.
When it comes to social,
video in general,
this is powerful. Yeah. When it comes to social, I mean, you've been a social seller. I think you were talking about it before. A lot of these people were 5, 6, 7 a decade ago. Is there any tools that, I mean, certainly LinkedIn, I get it, but is there something from a social selling standpoint that you feel like reps should have kind of their eye on, a little fun little tool or something else that is kind of just tighten that motion when people are kind of thinking social selling?
Yeah, I used to geek out on this hard, you know that. And if you would have asked me this like 2 years ago, I would have listed off a list of tools that I thought were epic. But since I've moved from a frontline seller to managing and actually implementing inside sales like social selling programs, I've learned a super valuable lesson that social selling has to be really simple.
Yeah.
People will not adopt it if they can't understand it, and if they can't understand it and make quick wins, it's never going to happen because there's so many layers of how scary it is for sellers that you've got to get them to wins really quick to see them for them to realize the ROI of it. And so for me, I would rather just say, hey, pay for Sales Nav, pay for LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and if you want to get excited, use Point Drive from LinkedIn. It's phenomenal, right? So LinkedIn Sales Nav and Point Drive together just like is awesome. And then like if you want to get nerdier, I just encourage you to go research it yourself because I would not suggest going a lot deeper than that.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point. I mean, I think that's one of the things you and I have talked about is social selling and people going too far down those paths of fun tools and going into worlds of, other platforms. And it's like, I'm testing out Facebook or I'm testing out Twitter. And it's like, whoa, wait a minute, man. Like you can go deep enough on LinkedIn and I'm not just talking about the technology, but the best practices around it or testing different in-mail capabilities or, listening capabilities or strategies. So it's like, go deeper on LinkedIn, go to Navigate. I like that. I think that's smarter rather than getting kind of, well, what about this tool, this new Chrome extension, this new thing? It's like, whoa, wait a minute. Just get one and get it working before you try to get 2, 3, 4, 5. That is probably a lesson learned. I'm a little surprised because I used to think of you kind of as a guy you could go to probably get your kind of top 10 tools, social tools, but it sounds like
I can give them to you.
Lessons learned.
I can give them to you, but I'm going to send 90% of the listeners are going to go down a rabbit hole if I do. And like the point I'm making is for the people that are ready to use those tools, they'll uncover them on their own. If they figure out how to leverage LinkedIn Sales Nav first. So start there.
I love it. Give me your quick thoughts on Point Drive. I mean, you mentioned it. I still think it's something underutilized. You feel like that's kind of a accident waiting to happen, almost like a video piece. People are going to really jump on that, or is that just an unhidden treasure? What's kind of your quick thoughts on Point Drive?
Yeah, I think it's an unhidden treasure. I don't think people understand how to use tools like Point Drive. I hear a lot of times people say it's like a Pinterest for your buyer, right? I'm building you a board, and you can see all the things that I'm putting on there for you. But I think people they're trying to define it, but it's so much more valuable than that. And the idea is that if you use Point Drive pages, that are account level, right? Don't build buyer like persona based point drives or segment based point drives or product based point drives, because then the data that you're collecting is irrelevant. You're collecting a ton of data from different people that doesn't tell you anything about what your actual buyer is doing. So what you need to do is build your point drive pages based on the accounts that you're selling into, right? So then you're encouraging your champion to socialize the content that you're sharing with them on point drive within an organization. And now guess what? Every time they share that link, you get to uncover different decision makers in the buying process. So now you know who they're sharing it with, you know what those people are consuming, and you know what they're like, what they care about. So the next time I have a conversation with you, I can say, hey, Gabe, I noticed you shared this link with so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and they spent some time taking a look at these assets and actually spent a lot of time on this specific asset. Let's talk about, is this a current project that we're working on right now at InsideSales.com? Like, that is a conversation. That's not discovery, right?
I like the account focused rather than maybe the persona focused. That is a good takeaway. Well, our time's probably coming to an end here, Jake. Really appreciate it. Before we go, what kind of closing remarks? Anything you want to leave with the audience as we kind of close this session in the Sales Development Summit?
Ooh, good question. Anything I want?
Yeah, I mean, carte blanche. You got it. DM, seize the day.
You know what I would honestly, like, as we've thought about all these different topics, and I think about why I have such an opinion on all of them, the piece of advice that I would want to leave with people is that I have taken the time to test. Like, stop listening to the gurus, stop listening to the thought leaders and the ninjas and all the people who like if you're not talking to people who have tested these ideas and broken them and experimented and failed and weren't fired for failing because they knew what they were doing, that's what you need to do. So if these are things that you want to be experimenting with, go do it. Don't ask permission. Just do it. Figure it out. And it's an iterative process. There's no failure here, because as you iterate and you figure it out, then you'll understand what works. And that's why I've come to understand the importance of segmentation. I've come to understand the importance of delineating what it is you're doing in what spaces. Go test.
Wow. I mean, I have nothing else to say, man. I think it's wise words for a wise man. So, Jake, really appreciate it. And for the audience, I hope you definitely enjoy not only this session, but the rest of the Sales Development Summit. Have a good one.